well with the quarantine and staying home and staying safe. I apologize for the delay in getting these back to you. Been trying to balance that work-home life with the 4 kids and all that fun stuff is proving a little bit tricky in certain situations. Anyway, found some time to record this. I thought I would do this visually instead of read it out. So this way you guys could see some more visual feedback, and then I figure we'll go over it much like it would in class, like a full critique, so you can see other people's projects as well, and hopefully maybe apply some of that feedback to your designs. So this way we're seeing everybody's. I'm going to try to keep it brief, briefer than I usually do, I guess, and I'll put some timestamps in here so you guys can see if you want to skip ahead or skip to your part. I would suggest that you look at all of these, but this way you can see your own time signatures in the video link when it's all said and done. So going through, I'll open Lauren's. Going through in general, what I'm finding is there's a few people that have used images that were not provided, and also manipulating the logos or manipulating some of the images, which is a big no-go for this assignment. This was going to be handled in a pretty corporate fashion, so as you would get from a client. And one of the major things that we talked about in going over this originally was to give that logo that free space here, which we'll just kind of start the critique. The free space here is cut off, so you need that, and it looks kind of awkward when there's nothing in it, but you need that free space around this BMW Rundell here. And then also this would be one of the images that was not provided, which we're not using for this project. We're only using the images that are required. And then again, this is a little bit light on the text. You need to have a headline, tagline, etc., etc. I would suggest going back to some of the samples, the original video for the assignment, looking at the samples to get sort of a feel for that BMW look on this. But in general, overall, not a bad start. Again, I would work on this logo placement and that free space, and then you can choose a different image. There's somewhat similar images that you can use if you wanted to use this as an idea for an image, having text, a headline here and a tagline underneath, or even like a tagline, across the bottom here. But overall, not a relatively bad start, not a whole lot to critique here, but those 2 items specifically, that logo and the images that we're not to be using. We're only using the images that are provided, which are here in our BMW images folder. Like I said, there might be a similar, as I just sort of cycle through, even it might not be the color you wanted, but even, this is a relatively similar shot to use that you had in there. As I scroll through, there's a couple that you might be able to turn, or flip rather. Like this one's a little bit trickier for using text, but you get the general idea. There's some that are a little bit more formatted in the same way you had it. So moving on to go to InDesign here. Tinia we'll go to. So we have the 2. On a couple of these, I'm missing some fonts. I'm not too worried about that. But what I would suggest is when you finalize these is to outline those fonts, or include them so that I can see it. I would suggest, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it because I'm missing it, but if you highlight it and under type, as my computer lags up, right here we have the create outlines feature. So it's no longer editable text. I would do a save as, so you have your original working file, and then save as, outline all your text, and then save it as a different document. And then again, some of these, I think we might have used some images or manipulated images that are not included. If you are manipulating some of the images, like turning it or flipping it or cropping it and saving these simple edits, you need to include these when you submit after your revisions. You need to include the images as well so that I have them. So it looks like here, if we go into our links, there is an X62 flipped image that's missing, a logo edit that's missing, and I'm not sure what was done. I'm assuming maybe a crop, but again, I would suggest not doing that and fitting that logo entirely with that blank space, with that free space around it in this spot. But overall, without seeing the font, you can see I like the headline here. The Active 6 has arrived. Ultimate driving machine. I might move this just potentially in this corner here. Maybe not the corner, but to not. Oops. As I move your whole thing here. To give it a little bit more breathing room. Try it in white maybe if you haven't already, if you like the black over the white. It's got this sort of pink outline because we're missing the font obviously, but maybe make this even a little bit bigger. And then as I think I moved, there you go, I moved your image. You might be able to even knock this logo more in the corner. I'm doing this kind of quick and dirty, but move this logo more in the corner. Give yourself a little bit of room as far as if you wanted to include this text, I might suggest getting it to like 2 lines maybe if possible, and having it instead of more of a vertical block, a more horizontal block, just so it's a little bit easier to read. You might even be able to drop this, 20 point. You can definitely drop that a little bit. 20 point is a fairly large font. Remember, these are large postcards, so in the hand they're gonna be pretty huge, and you could probably even get away with dropping this to like a 14 point font. Let's just try it. A 14 point font, you're gonna have to manipulate things a little bit, but that might allow you to get this on 1 or 2 lines rather. Make it, just clean it up a little bit if you wanted to even left justify it or right justify it, so that way it goes around the car more, but just some minor details there. This one, again, this has your image that's missing. I don't know what edit that is, unfortunately. This is that X2 flipped. I would provide that if you were to choose this one to revise and resubmit. Just make sure that I have that image. And again, you have that logo edit. I would just make sure that you have that that full logo in there. Again, I feel like this. We have our Ultimate Driving Machine is a little bit behind the logo. This might be a font issue, but just make sure that that's out away from the logo. Without seeing the image, it's tough to tell. I kind of like this. The headline structure you have here, freedom is here with the all-new active hybrid. Depending on your image, I might even move this text down. Again, you can probably drop it down a little bit. Well, 14 point, that's not too bad. You can probably even drop it down a little bit if it works, if it's not too text heavy. Again, bringing this down, maybe even 12 point, probably even get away with 10 point, and try to get this, within here. It might be a little bit text heavy at the bottom, but you just have to try it. I like the addition of color, the sort of burgundy maroon behind, and the detail shots work really well. I think overall with some minor tweaks, both of these could work really well and look very sort of classically BMW. It's again just including those images and watching that logo spacing. But overall, I think you go with either one of these with some sort of minor modifications and tweaks to them. All right, so we'll go on to the next one, Melinda's here, as I move in my window all around. So we have our 2 submissions. Again, we're missing a font. I'm not really too concerned about that, but again, I would just outline those fonts so I can see what you're doing here. So we'll look at one. I'll back out just a little bit. Again, using a similar shot, which is going to happen with these because there's only so many shots, but I included. I want you to use the shots that I included. So this way, if you guys are using the same shots, you guys can kind of see what people are doing differently with each image. Like what we've done here with the logo, doing the ultimate driving experience. I didn't require that, but some people included it. Works well as long as it's done properly, which this is. You have that free space. That's kind of what that free space is intended for. And then creating this secondary box that BMW does. I like the extra research that you put into that to find out that extra little detail that the BMW often includes in their advertisements, either for the model that they're advertising or for the dealership or some additional information. I think it works really well. You might be even able to, let's see how big this is. Oh, 10 point. All right. I was going to say you could scale it down a little bit, but maybe not so much. If you had any room maybe to move this over slightly, give the car a little bit of breathing room. I like the rule your world, the simple headline, very BMW. I might change the font. They generally don't really use serifed fonts in their ads. I might change that to a more classically BMW, even just Helvetica or Arial. But change it to a heavier, bolder font, and maybe knock it down slightly, even if you not completely left or right justified, but instead of having it dead center, you could have it off a little bit, and then maybe even if you had room to make this shot a little bit smaller, just to give it a little bit more breathing room. But overall, I think well done. It works with the BMW look. Some minor tweaks there for that one. Again, we have a similar setup here. I like the idea, again, using this logo and the informational space. Again, very similar edits. This one you have a little, maybe not so much room to crop. I might, again, sort of a similar thing, either having this a little bit smaller, tuck into the right corner or the left corner, depending. I would probably say the right might be a little bit easier to read, especially with black text. If you wanted to, you might even be able to throw a graphic across the top just to give it a little bit of a background if you wanted to change your colors, and make this a little bit smaller, sort of have like either a black or I don't know, it might be too much, but have a black bar across the top and have white text in there to sort of match this, or just change this, make it a little bit smaller. Again, I would say stay away from the sans serifed fonts, or rather the serifed fonts, and go with the sans serif font. Again, it's sort of more BMW, but again, very sort of classically BMW front headshot. Well done. You could go, again, sort of go with either of these two. It's just a matter of which one you want to work with for your revisions. All right, and then moving on to Connor. His first one here, we'll zoom in just a touch. For this one, sorry about the pause. For this one, again, use images that I'm including rather than found images, but you probably find one that works similarly to this one. But for this one, I might break this up and have this be sort of the sub. If you wanted to have this sort of down here, make it a tiny bit bigger, and then you could even have your, this be more of your headline. You have some room to move this. Well, if you use a different photo, obviously, to make this more of a headline here, using those, using that with all caps sans serif font. Again, going classically BMW with this one. I think it would work really well as a headline rather than a subhead, and then you could have your new active hybrid 6x6 either here or separated a little bit just to give it a little bit more breathing room. But overall, pretty well done. And we'll take a look at your second one. Okay, so moving on to the second one. Again, I would say sort of a similar thing. If you had room to make this a touch smaller, maybe move it down a little bit, which you do. Even sort of you want to sort of keep that within in that safe space. This image is a tricky one to work with as a full image. But again, I would say sort of similar critiques if you can. Having this sort of be your sub headline, and then having this be definitely a more BMW type font, rather than the BMW would definitely not use a Comic Sans type font, but definitely have more of a sans serif BMW type font. The guiding philosophy of every X model is simple. Which is what? So it sort of gives a little bit of intrigue there. But again, I would say a similar thing, maybe separate those two to give them a little bit of breathing room. Maybe choose a different image or see if there's another image that works, or modifying this image a little bit to make sure that works with what you want to do. But overall, again, this one I would say, the little bit of input that I gave you there, definitely choosing a different image that's included in our grouping. This one, if you have room to use the image. That's that. Okay. That's inside your frame there. If you wanted to use this image, just some tweaking, or choose a different image for this one. But overall, nicely done. All right, moving on to Amaryan. I only see one submission so far, but we'll look at it. It's a good submission. Again, going back to the logo, we need to see that full logo, including that free space in there. You're cutting off that free space in the white. I don't mind your headline area that you have set up is done really well. The car shots look really good. Like the use of multiple shots works really well. The way it's sort of organized in different sizes works well. I would double check to make sure that you're not stretching this one. It's tough to tell. It looks like it might be a little bit stretched, but just make sure that you're not stretching it. I might move that over a little bit too, so it's within that within your safe space, your safe area. But again, I would double check to make sure you're not stretching any product shots. And I would say for this one, it's pretty clean, pretty simple in a good way. I might see if you can drop this in a different area, even bottom left, and then have, a headline. You have this area to come up with a tagline or headline or something like that, that would be sort of fitting with the BMW attitude. Again, overall, just some minor critiques here. Even if you wanted to use the black on black, I like the white with the black background, but just make sure you're using that whole logo. And again, you have a plenty of free space in here to use that logo. Again, moving your active hybrid to the bottom there, you might need to play around with the colors there and have an area for your headline. But overall, pretty well done. Again, I like the use of the 3 different shots and how you have it organized. So they're all different sizes, and they work well together. All right, moving on to Peter. So Peter, again, only using shots that I'm providing. Watch that logo. You're cropping in way too close. It needs that full white box around the logo, that free space. Again here, cropping it out like that is a big no-go as far as BMW goes. So stick within that BMW sort of classic looks. If you wanted to do this ultimate driving machine, I would look at some BMW ads, some real ones, and make sure that you're sort of copying it more exactly. Using a sans serif font rather than a serif font. Try to match that sort of BMW text more exact. And then getting to the actual content here, we'll go to this one first. A little bit text heavy. I like the way you have it set up, to be honest, with the main shot here and then some info here. It's a little bit text heavy. What you might be able to do is, if you were to use the full logo, have it in the bottom corner, maybe the bottom left corner here. I'm trying to see if there's anything you can pull out of here. If you want to do something like, behold style unlike anything else, and have that be your headline here, and then you can make this, you can make this text a little bit smaller, and arrange it a little bit more readable within this space, and then you have your active, your active hybrid. But I would have some sort of headline here, or tagline, whatever you want to call it, here, and then again just sort of rearrange your information here so it's a little bit more readable. And even having this in the bottom left, or even bottom in the middle, but just make sure you're using that whole logo with the free space and all. And then moving on to this one, you sort of are getting there with the headline. Don't mind the graphic. If you wanted to have the black bleed all the way to the edge of your image here, so you don't have this kind of outline. Again, choose an image from the ones provided. The same thing with the logo there. If you're going to do, if you're going to have the Ultimate Driving Machine, make sure that you're using that classic BMW thing. The other thing I would say is this is really text heavy, and you wouldn't put text on the product. They don't know. No manufacturer of anything wants their products obscured like that. I sort of like the idea, see what you were doing, having some information on this column here. But even if we were to do, again, you almost have a headline here, a style unlike anything else previously released, or a style unlike anything else could be your headline if you wanted that a little bit bigger across here. And then you could have, new from BMW, have that line across the bottom a little bit smaller. And then honestly, I wouldn't worry about putting all of this text in here. You can use the back of the postcard for that. Again, looking at some of the samples, you could, having the more heavy informational stuff, you could put on the back of the card if you were to use an image like this. Again, with both of these, I would keep in mind that logo thing I was talking about, keeping the entire logo and the free space, that full black or white square, depending on what you're using, and using images that only the images that were provided. I think these are both great starts, and whichever one you choose to use, just keep those things in mind. All right, going on to Amber's. Again, here we're missing an image. Looking at the link, there's a 16A. I'm assuming that was edited in some way. I just want to make sure that you're including those images. And again, keeping in mind you're not modifying the images in any way, cropping or resizing or flipping, etc. is good, as long as you're not manipulating the images. So without that, seeing that image, I'm assuming it's a version of this image that was edited. So I would guess it's, that image sort of up here. Again, I would go back to, it's really text heavy. I would save some of this maybe for the back of the postcard. These two sort of thin areas on the left and the right make it, pretty hard to read. I like what you have in general set up. Again, we're gonna, we have the same logo issue. Cropping it like this is a no-go. If you wanted to sort of keep this similar setup, I kind of like the idea of having the one image at the top, another image at the bottom, and have this, the black, heavier black line in the middle. If you wanted to use that as a design element, I'm trying to think of a way to rearrange that. Even if you had it a little bit smaller, and had, two thinner black lines on the edge as well, and you could expand your picture a little bit more. Give yourself, just trying to see what okay. If you had, I see what's going on here. If you had this a little bit smaller, and you had your images going across the top and the bottom, and then having your BMW logo at the bottom left or right. And then, again, sort of save some of this heavy information for the back of the postcard. Let the sort of visuals speak a little bit more. You could have the new active hybrid X6, across the middle if you wanted to, mimicking that ultimate driving machine you're doing here. And then having it, a tagline. I keep saying headline or tagline because usually headline is at the top, but in this case, it's essentially a tagline. But having a tagline either at the top or the bottom or even in the middle, etc. And then, you could move some of this information to the back of the card. But overall, I like, the concept of what you've done, with the, with the breakup of the images. I think works really well. And then looking at your second, again, overall, I would say basically the same things. You kind of have this, I like the black boxes you have on the sides. Again, worrying about this, you could even use the black background logo. You could even have it a little bit smaller, in this area here to go along with this black, with the black border. Again, this one works a little bit better. I would say it's still very text heavy. You could have the new active hybrid X6 and have a tagline going across the top of your image. Might work a little bit better. Here. And then again, worry about all this information being more on the back of the card. It's a little bit text heavy. It's smaller and you have that effect on it, so it's a little bit difficult to read. So again, I might just simplify this a little bit. But good use of imagery. Again, watch the logos. And I like the layouts of both of these actually. So it's, again, all of these are up to you, whichever one you choose to revise. For these, I would essentially say to go a little bit more, simplify a little bit more, edit a little bit more on these, and let the visuals sort of speak for themselves. All right, going to Skylar's here. Let's go to this one. All right. And I would say, honestly, in this case, maybe a little bit of the opposite, that it might be a little too clean. I like what you've done here. I might, again, working with the logos, making sure that you're including the full logo, full free space, etc. You can set it even in this area here. I like the greener, cleaner, better. I like that look that you have going on there. I might use a different product shot and carry it over, even further over, to give more of a full product. It's, a little bit of intrigue is good, but you want to make sure that you have a shot that features the full vehicle. If you're using one of these detail shots like this, especially sort of like a rear bumper, you're not really getting an idea of the car at all. So I might choose a different shot that features more of the car itself, even if it's, still a piece of it, but you want to feature, a little bit more. I'm just sort of cycling through here, a little bit more of, for example, if you wanted to use like sort of this piece, or go into, even sort of the more classic front shot here, something similar like that. But I like this idea of having the white and then even having this carry into, having your greener, cleaner, better carry into the image from that white space to your image, and having this information at the bottom there. Again, I would go using a sans serif font. Look more at the BMW advertisements that I showed you. Work with a sans serif font rather than a serif font, as they don't really tend to use serif fonts in their ads. But overall, really well done, really clean. I like it. And then going to this one, you have a little bit of a different look. Not that it's not clean, but a little bit busier, which is good. I like the idea of the detail shots. So you have the one main shot and the detail shots here. Again, making sure that you're using the full logo. I might reverse these, so you have Adventure Has Never Been Greener. I like that. I might have that be your headline, or even make it bigger across the bottom, to have that be more of a headline. And then you can make this even a touch smaller, but even if you left it, see what it looks like at the same size. But you might be able to knock that down just a tiny bit and then bring this up a little bit bigger, to have your Adventure Has Never Been Greener. And even if you wanted to do a similar thing, you'd have to change the color. I don't know how the black would look, black text on this would look, but even if you wanted to have that carry across, you have this this image coming across the two, which works really well. I would make sure that these are both within your safe space, and pay attention to your bleed and your trim area on this one specifically. If you want this image to bleed off of all of your edges, make sure that it's carrying across. Yeah, you have room. Make sure that it's carrying across and it's bleeding fully out. Or if you wanted to have a white margin, sort of similar to this, you want to make sure that you're carrying that. I like the idea of not having, I think this is going to stretch it, but you get the idea. I like the idea of not having the bleed on this side. So, you'd have to kind of manipulate a little bit and make sure, you have plenty of room. Make sure that your frame extends at least to your bleed. So you want to make sure that that extends at least to that bleed there. You might have to, modify a little bit there so that this stays within that safe space, but you get the general idea. I like the idea of having, having your picture fully bleed. My fan's going crazy. I don't know if you can hear that. I like the idea of having the bleed fully on, partially on the top and the bottom and the side, and then having it a white, white outline here. I want to make sure that, again, this is outside of that safe space. So if you want to have all these images, you might need to rearrange these a little bit or resize, but I would make sure that they're within that space. Even if you knock it down just slightly, you might need to rearrange these a little bit. You could even move this, provided you're using the whole logo, move that into this area, or even if you wanted to move that into this area and have your headline over here, etc., etc. These are just some ideas. Overall, I think both are pretty well done, with some tweaking. We could have a really good final output for these. Going to hands here. All right. So these, again, I would say just a little bit text heavy. I like where you have the logo placement, the green Ultimate Driving Machine makes sense because you have your hybrid here. I would, for this, maybe mimic this size, that free space. I think you might be stretching this logo a little bit too, so you want to be careful of that. Let's see. Yeah, you've stretched it a little bit. You can tell when you're scaling percentages there. So let's make sure you're not stretching those logos. But if you wanted to have another square here with this information and fit that within within the BMW square, kind of like other advertisements have, even if you wanted to put them next to each other, as I move your stuff around, if you wanted to put them next to each other like they do in other ads, you could have your, I know I'm leaving stuff by orphaning stuff here, but even if you wanted to have this a little bit smaller even and have all that information in there, and then you have room for more for a headline here, I would lose this entirely, and just let the sort of image. I like you have a decent start for headline. I might just say leave the other competition. You want to make sure that you're spell checking competition in the dust, and then you could have the first ever sports activity coupe, across the bottom or something like that, separate it, make sure that this is, this is your headline, really lead with that headline. I might, let me see, I was going to see if, okay. I like the little bit of green behind the black, works well with a serifed font. It's a little bit tricky to read. It does sort of make it, a little bit less visible. I would go with a heavier, definitely more BMW style font like this, and that would make that green drop shadow stand out a little bit more on top of or behind the black rather. Definitely go with a heavier font, a little bit bigger. And again, if you did the leave, even if you said like leave the competition in the dust, I think other competition might be a little bit redundant. I'm not sure, but I feel like simplify. Simple is always better in this case. So you could have like, leave the competition in the dust, and have that, across the top. And then you could have, the first ever across the bottom here, first ever sports activity coupe, and you could have that a little bit smaller. Overall, I think some minor tweaks there. Again, similar critiques with with these two boxes here. You might be able to make them a little bit smaller and have the two boxes here. You could have rule the road behind the wheel and have that be your headline, and then have new active hybrid X6 across here. You kind of have like two headlines going, or two taglines. So you have like delivering the thrills of a BMW in a style unlike, you could have, it's a little bit wordy if you wanted to simplify that and want that to be your headline across the top here. And then have your active hybrid, sort of similar to what I was talking about with the top one, just rearranging these a little bit. I would get rid of one of these. I feel like your font works a little bit, this font works a little bit better in this case, and if you could get it a little bit bigger, it might be a little bit more readable, and have that that drop shadow a little bit tighter behind that text. You can see where it sort of drops out a little bit in this area, but if you had that less wording, you could get it a little bit bigger and make it more of a headline. But I would just clean it up a little bit depending on which one you want to go with. Again, very similar critiques with simplifying headlines, moving things around a little bit. I think overall either of these could be successful for a final submission. All right, now Ethan's. So Ethan's, I think we just had one. And again, unfortunately, I don't really see any of the links because I don't know what these are. I'm guessing these might be images that you downloaded yourself. So not a whole lot to critique here. It looks like the logo was edited as well. I don't mind the graphic here. We're not doing the M3. So just pay attention to the assignment details. It's the active hybrid X6. Make sure you're getting, if you're using that ultimate driving machine, you want to make sure that it's that tagline within the logo there rather than just as a headline. So you're sort of missing a headline there. And it's the wrong vehicle. So I'm not sure what we're using here, but make sure that you're using images that were provided. Make sure you're using the logos that are provided and not editing the logos at all. I don't mind this graphic that you have going on. You have this kind of like banner graphic. If you want it to bleed off the edge, then you want to make sure that you are carrying that all the way through. If you don't want it to, then obviously leaving it there is fine. This might not be a bad idea for your model. You could have the active hybrid X6 model information here. And then depending on the image that you use, you could have your headline or your tagline up here. But yeah, I would just make sure you go back to those, go back to the project details and make sure that you are advertising the correct vehicle. I wanted to see if there was other pages here. No, just one. Okay. So, again, make sure that we're paying attention to the project details, and meeting the requirements of the assignment. And then lastly, we have Elijah Tyler. I was looking at the last name. So again, similar critiques here. It looks like you've downloaded some images, manipulated them as well, which is definitely a no-go as far as any advertiser is concerned. You don't want to modify colors or change things. Again, I would say that this is definitely a little bit text heavy. I would have some sort of headline or tagline here. Using an image. Definitely use an image that's provided. We are only using the images that are provided. Make sure you include the logo somewhere. This text is kind of buried because the image is so different and heavily modified color-wise. It's hard to read anything on top of it, and it's very pixelated. Again, which is why you only use the images that are provided, because they're going to be proper resolution. So a lot missing from here: logo, headline, etc. Again, if you wanted to have some information here, you wouldn't necessarily put a full really long, like here you can see your super long informational here. For the general client information, this was actually just text from the project description, not necessarily intended to go into your advertisement. That was more for you guys to do some research. So if you wanted to check out your general client information or on the actual model information, that wasn't intended to be in your project here. But if you wanted to include a link or something like that, look at some of the others that were done where they use those two boxes to have the informational box next to the logo box, etc. And again, I would say for this one, again, using an image that was provided, you also want to make sure that you are not modifying the images. Like here, we don't know really what you're selling here. You don't know the model. I mean, you can read it, but you don't get any kind of look, and you definitely want to make sure that you are spell checking and making sure that your grammar is correct here. Because if you have a client that has misspelled words or something that clearly wasn't spell checked and it runs, the client is not going to be happy. But again, similar critiques as to the first one, using images that are provided. Again, you want to have, if you had like made for your comfort or made for your pleasure as your headline, and then you could have your logo bottom left or bottom right, and then have your active hybrid X6 down at the bottom here, and get rid of this made by your trusted car, because it's not made by the car dealers. It's made by BMW, so you get rid of that line. Maybe you could edit this a little bit, made for your comfort, or ride in comfort and style, something like that. Simplify the headline, but definitely use the images provided. Make sure you're using the logos, and make sure you're not modifying those. Make sure you're not modifying those images, so that we can actually tell what you're selling and what you're working with there. And I believe that's the last one that we have. So hopefully you guys, by including, I know this is a little bit longer, but by including everybody in the one critique, hopefully you guys can potentially get some ideas from your classmates and see what everybody else is doing as well. And again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email me, and I will get back to you. If you want to set up anything else, some people have been doing Zoom meetings. I'm not sure how having a meeting like that would work in your schedules, but I wouldn't be opposed to working with you that way if you wanted to do that. But again, take a look at this full critique. I'll post the timestamps so you guys can see. What we're doing. Let's skip that deployment. See what we're doing, and hopefully get some ideas from your classmates as well. And any questions, comments, or concerns, just let me know.